I would without community, I would not be here. So thank you to everyone that because we do this work together, right? And I'm very happy to be here today. And I really want to thank Maskwacis Cultural College for hosting this event, and Manisha for all her work. The video we are recording, as you just apparently we're live streaming. I'm just clicking on boxes. Manish is the intelligence behind the event. So, but we are recording this, and I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel. And so it will be up for future reference. And so I'll include more information on Maskwacis Cultural College and on the book and all of that stuff in the video description, of course. So let's share some time together. I can see a bunch of names and I've got the chat box open. So do feel free. I mean, I have all of your questions. If people submitted questions when they registered, I have those with me, and we'll do a big kind of wrap up Q&A at the end. But if something comes up while we're chatting or when I do a couple of readings from the book, please feel free. And also, I want it to be a little bit interactive, right? I mean, we're sharing space. So if something really, I don't know, what's the word, like hits you, what's a better word for that? If you really are feeling something, please feel free to put in the chat box like, yes, or I went through that, or, or whatever, please feel free to share. I don't find that, difficult at all. I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along. So welcome everyone. I see some hearts. Good. I'm glad some of you are on board with that. So welcome everyone. I think before I do a reading from the new book, I'm actually going to start talking about, not for a long time, but just mentioning the other book that came out in 2019, Legacy, because Killing the Wittigo, the new book, is a young adult title, but I also wrote it knowing that there would be plenty of adults who would read this book, because a lot of adults read YA books. I know I do, Cherie Dimoline's books, so there's always a crossover. But I wrote it because, and this is where Legacy comes into it, I actually started writing Legacy because of the students that I had worked with in the Toronto District School Board between the late aughts into about 2012-ish, when I was teaching in Toronto. Because I guess I should say, I didn't say this yet, I'm sorry, that, I left Northern Alberta to get an education, post-secondary education, and then I ended up in Toronto, I thought, for a one-year course at what was then Ryerson University. No, it was Ryerson Technical Institute at the time. And then Ryerson rejected me from their one-year journalism program for degree graduates. And life works out just exactly as it's meant to, right? So I ended up getting into agency work and education and freelance writing and this kind of writing. So, the universe has a way of making things work out just the way they're supposed to. But I thought I'd be in Toronto for like a year, and I ended up spending 29 years there. So when I was teaching in the Toronto District School Board, I went into teaching when I was 39. I was what they call a mature candidate. And I see some comments coming in, so I will get there as well. Keep them coming. And I thought, in my ignorance, that things would be better for Indigenous kids today. That's what I thought. And I think in some ways it is, because I know growing up in the 1970s and 80s, it was a shameful thing growing up in Peace River to admit that you were Indigenous. I mean, at least it was for some of us. It was something you tried to hide. It was something that, I had to in the 90s kind of dealing with all of this stuff. And so I thought, okay, we've been doing this for like 20, 25 years, right? And things are going to be different for our kids, right? And I was actually really shocked to find out that, you know, young Indigenous kids today are dealing with this burden of intergenerational trauma. I just had not considered it. And I thought, you know, I've been working in agencies in Toronto, Indigenous agencies since the 90s. Things are going to be different, right? It's post-resistance at Ganazadage, at Oka. Everything's different, right? No, it actually, I mean, in some ways it is. We talk more about things. Canada is changing a little bit. The media is changing. But, you know, our young people, they need us, right? Our young people are awesome. And there's nothing wrong with our young people, by the way, but this burden of intergenerational trauma, I saw it in play in the students and families that I worked with. I realized that it was something that I carried as well. It wasn't like I was just pointing at them. It was all of us were still dealing with this, and I was unprepared for that. I really was. So then when I got this idea from teaching young folks and working with their families, that I needed to write a book about intergenerational trauma in the Indigenous context, out popped Legacy. And it's kind of a thick book, sorry. And my copy's all dog-eared and, you know, got the little tabs on it. And the whole time I was writing it, I was like, well, I know that there are some young people who will read this. I used to read books like Legacy. I mean, the library was my friend when I was a kid because I'm a big nerd, right? School was a safe place for me. But the whole time I was writing it, I kept thinking about young folks. And I thought, and even, you know, adults who are more reluctant readers or who aren't really called to a bunch of words in a book, who might want another format or something, right? Because we're all so different in our multiplicities. And I kept thinking, should I put it on a website? What should I do? You know, and then there you go. That's where Killing the Wittigo came from, because I just realized that I want to have the same things that are in Legacy, also some new things that are very much related to young people's lives that maybe were not included in Legacy. I took out a few things that I thought, you know, usually happens later in life for people. I didn't think that really fit into a YA book. I definitely tried to make it shorter. It's not quite so thick. And that's where Wittigo has come from. This idea that, you know, when I've gotten emails and stuff on my socials from young people who say, hey, I got this book for my cousin, and you know, thanks for writing it, you know, and I thank you all, but I'm like, if I could get an actual YA title out there, you know, how many more young people I might reach, right? So that was a lot of talking, but that's okay. Now you know the entire context about where these two books came from. Now, I'm going to turn to the chat for a second before I read from Killing the Wittigo. And someone saying Shago from Kingston. And well, Suzanne, you rock. Thank you. You rock too. We have, Treaty 8 Grand Prairie. We used to go to Grand Prairie for like dinner when we lived in Peace River. If we got tired of like the Sun Restaurant or, you know, Peace Garden Restaurant, we'd go to Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie's a place. It was like a big thing, like, oh, we're driving to Grand Prairie, right? Now, Allison says, hi, Suzanne, I just got a copy of Killing the Wittigo at the library. Yes, and thank you for saying that, Allison, because, you know, I know that not everybody has money for books. So all of my books are in the library. Please go to the library. If, you know, I don't expect people to like buy books all the time. It's not within everyone's reach. She's in Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Okay, so Coast BC-ish, well, Vancouver, it's mainland, I guess. And you guys are so complimentary, just stop. You can all read the chat, everyone. I feel too weird reading all these compliments about, you know, how incredible Legacy is. No, you guys are incredible for reading it and for doing the work, right? And for all of us for doing this work. It's important work that we change things for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and for our young people, right? We've got someone from Treaty 13. Okay, Daganonto, dish with one spoon territory. Awesome. Okay, so I thought I'd start, and I'm mindful of time because it always goes quicker, doesn't it? I think it does. I've got a whole bunch of stickies already on the new book. So with my favorite kind of readings, and I went through last night, and I thought, where should I start with the Maskwacis event? And I thought I would start with the Wittigo definition, because there might be some folks who don't know what, the reference Killing the Wittigo really might, relate to. So, and actually, let me kind of show you, as nerdy as it is, I made Killing the Wittigo into like what I call a chunky book, because legacy, you kind of got to start in chapter 1, and you kind of, I mean, not always, I guess, each chapter has a theme, but it makes the most sense if you go from the beginning to the end. You kind of have to read it in order, a lot of words, paragraph form. This book, I wanted Killing the Wittigo to be really different and really accessible to every person, reading level, and their likes and dislikes in what they like to read. So it's kind of chunky. So you see that there's like chunks of stuff, and then there's box stuff, and there's, a lot of lists, so that you can basically open this book up at any point and start reading. And then if it gets to be too much, or you decide, oh, that's enough for today, or whatever, then you can pick it up another day and start in another place, right? So I'm just going to start with Wittigo. And the big chunky part at the top says, disconnection and a lack of self-control are dangerous threats to collective societies. During the fur trade, the Wittigo acted as a warning to Indigenous people who turned away from reciprocity and relationships and toward individualism, greed, and selfishness. Today, the Wittigo is a symbol for capitalism and overconsumption. The Wittigo is also part of the cycle of intergenerational trauma, where people engage in interpersonal violence within the family, and when politicians act with greed and selfishness or to silence people in their communities. The Wittigo also describes the forces of colonization, the systems, institutions, and ways of thinking that stole land, destroyed and damaged Indigenous economies, and which continue to marginalize and oppress Indigenous peoples. Contemporary government policies and practices that undermine Indigenous wellness and prosperity, and the willful neglect of colonial governments that fail to address poverty and poor housing, health, and infrastructure in Indigenous communities, whether urban, rural, or on reserve/reservation. The Wittigo destroys connection to others and to yourselves. Singular, yourself. To kill the Wittigo, we have to get rid of the negative energy that makes a person feel disconnected, isolated, and alone. We have to, as individuals, stop engaging in selfish, greedy behaviors that destabilize our communities. We must show kindness to ourselves and to others. We must live by the values of respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and relationships. And do I have I had a lovely artist, a young artist, create, I can't find it now. I love trying to find stuff in my book during a reading. You'd think we'd know every page in our books. No, it's really hard to memorize. There is a drawing of the Wittigo in here, and it's really good. When I find it, I will show you. So the Wittigo is like a cannibal spirit figure in most Algonquian societies. So I know that there's East Coast Indigenous peoples who have the idea of the cannibal spirit, definitely in Cree society. And I found it. And so how I've described it in this book, just from what I know and have been told, is the Wittigo is a cannibal spirit creature from the oral traditions of many Indigenous nations. A Wittigo can take possession of a person's soul, and it can also haunt a community. When a person is possessed by the Wittigo, they lose their humanity, destroying family members and those they love the most. Stories about the Wittigo warn us to practice kindness, sharing, and self-control. And then I don't have anything to put up. I'll just show you the book. And there's a very contemporary drawing of the Wittigo. This idea that, I mean, I had a story about the Wittigo and legacy, and I wanted to bring, obviously, the Wittigo idea here. I don't have that story in this book, but I wanted the idea that there's intergenerational trauma can be seen as a haunting, right? And that it's something that we do have to battle, but that in showing kindness, there's a lot of Wittigo stories that have the protagonists in the story treat the Wittigo with kindness and welcome that figure back into community through, getting rid of that negative energy. So that's why I named the book the way it is. Let me see, what's our time like? It should be okay. I also wanted to share with you today a poem. I did not write it. It is written by Montana, one of the young people that I spoke with to create this book. In Legacy, I used examples from my own life and my family's life and my work life, and also stories in the media. And the media stories are still in Killing the Wittigo. Some of them I used like updated stories to like illustrate certain points. But I figured that young people today, are they going to care about what happened to me, in my life? Probably not. And if they do, they can read Legacy. I really, really wanted Killing the Wittigo to feature some voices of young people themselves. So I spoke with Montana and Kelsey and Kennedy. They're all students at some post-secondary. One is a high school student. And this poem is a reverse poem. If you've ever done a poetry workshop, you'll know the reverse poem format. It's something that you write so that when you read it from the top down, it reads one way. But then it's written so that it makes sense the other way. So if you read it from the bottom up, it reads differently. So I'll just read the poem both ways. So a reverse poem by Montana. I will always be just a drunken Indian. Do not try to tell me that I will be successful in life. There is no doubt. My future is already written because I have internalized the oppression. I will never think I am more than just my trauma. And even though my race defines my future, I know it is not reasonable to believe it is possible to reclaim what was taken. I acknowledge that I deserve the depths of oppression. The stereotypes overpower my strength, and it's a waste of time to think things will change. And I really want to thank Montana for bringing us into that place when we're all feeling that level, because it happens and it's real. But then I'm going to read that poem in reverse. Reverse poem by Montana, the other way. Things will change. It is a waste of time to think the stereotypes overpower my strength and I deserve the depths of oppression. I acknowledge that it is possible to reclaim what was taken. It is not reasonable to believe my race defines my future. I know I'm more than just my trauma. And even though I have internalized the oppression, I will never think my future is already written, because there is no doubt I will be successful in life. Do not try to tell me that I will always be just a drunken Indian. Now, I love that poem, and it makes me a little bit verklempt. And so I included it in the book because at the bottom of this page, I ask readers, how can you reverse your thinking? How would this change if you reversed your thinking? How would this change how you feel about yourself, about life, about the future, right? We got a comment, wow, so good. Yeah. I love that poem. We have a question. I'm seeing applause here. We do have a question later from the folks that registered and submitted some questions about, you know, working with the young folks that are present in this book. So I'll leave that for the Q&A at the end. And then I was thinking, I thought I'd end the reading portion before we get into like discussion and Q&A and stuff, around the section I have at the end, which is in the culture and spirit chapter or section. And this page talks about, well, it starts with, what is healing? It's different for every person. The meaning will change at different points in the community. And then there's just a big old list. And I want readers, I got a heart in the chat. Aw. I want readers to add this, they're like add to this, add their own things to this list. I want them to say, well, maybe that one doesn't apply to me, but hey, I can see that applying to people I've known. Or, I think I've done, you know, this, and this, and maybe they'll feel great about themselves that day because they realize how much they've already done, right? So the list starts with what is healing? Well, finding a spiritual process that includes transformational change and cultural renewal for people and communities. Getting back to our original soul, the sacred being at birth. Balancing mind, body, spirit, and emotion. Recognizing the effects of violence, economic barriers, racism, and dispossession has had on Indigenous peoples, families, and communities. And I gotta say, before I go on with the list, that was a big thing for me. You know, in the 90s, and I've already mentioned, you know, post-Gansatage/Oka, doing some activist work, going to Queen's Park when I was in Toronto, the provincial legislature, and protesting over the Ipperwash issue, and working with my colleagues to, you know, invite knowledge keepers and elders in and to do the work of creating models for our workplace, for our clients, for the folks we were working with, that were actually culture-based, you know, doing that sort of work, that was a huge thing for me. And, you know, just sitting and listening and learning from people who had so much to share, that was for me just recognizing the effects of colonization and then having that as a way to interpret, you know, what was happening and what I was seeing around me. Because I think survivors, and this is present in trauma literature, survivors of, you know, trauma, especially complex trauma, often carry a sense of self-blame, because that's what we're told, right? By either the dominant colonial society, or if there's a control figure, an abusive figure that we're, you know, in some sort of, you know, unequal power relationship with, if it's a person in our family, or, you know, an authority figure in a dominant society institution, even a figure in our own communities, in our own institutions, systems and institutions. You know, we often hear that, you know, this is all your fault, right? It's you're the weird one, and all that stuff. And so for me, that activism part of it was the aha moment where I went, oh, like none of this is my fault. Oh, cool. Wow. So now what does that mean? And then going forward, right? So activism has worked for a lot of us, I think, especially of my generation. I'm a Gen Xer, so you know, the 90s we were in our 20s, yeah, and then doing the work. So the list goes on with gaining and sustaining hope, developing a sense of identity and belonging. That was big for me as well. And I know for so many of the clients and students I've worked with. Having a feeling of well-being, empowerment, and control, that's huge. Working towards spiritual, mental, physical renewal or wellness. Gaining control over the direction of your life so you can reach your full potential. Changing community systems and improving social conditions. Those of us in helping professions, that kind of goes along with the activism work, right? Becoming joyful and open-minded and open-hearted, also a big thing for me. I was really angry in the 90s, like really angry. And you know what? I had a right to be. It's not my fault. But that doesn't really make your life easy either, right? So I had to work through that and understand how to let that open my heart and cultivate a joyful mind and spirit again. Reconnecting to your needs and believing that you're worthy of having them met, mourning what happened to you and grieving what was taken. I'm still doing that work, right? And I'm 55. So I didn't put it here, but maybe it's on the next page. Yeah, the idea that healing is a process, right? And that, you know, you're not just going to check things off and, oh, I'm done that now. Like, and you, sometimes I think I'm done something, like, oh, I get it now. And then like a year later or 5 years later, I go, oh, so that's coming back at me. And then there's like a deeper understanding. Yeah, it's a journey, lifelong, just like learning. And then the last one on this list, and there's probably so many more that you all are thinking of, what is healing? I decided to end with learning how to be safely, in parentheses, vulnerable and connect with others. Because that's connecting again to the Wittigo theme, right? It's the Wittigo is about, you know, individualism and greed and selfishness and behaviors that just are against the idea of being in a collective. Now, I sometimes see different places, you know, people often want to portray Indigenous cultures as like somehow like we weren't allowed to be individuals, or that individuality was frowned upon. That's not my understanding at all. The reason why we went out on a fast was to connect with our spirit helpers and to find out who we were. The reason why we had naming ceremonies is to find out who we were being reborn in this life and connecting with that name, that sacred kind of thing that we carry as an eternal soul, right? Boundaries were good. You know, we had a lot of boundaries where, you know, for instance, one that always pops to my mind, and I talked about this in Legacy, is that we didn't have like cross-sex communication like often. And of course, I don't speak for every nation or every family or every community in a nation, but I've been told by folks, you know, from the Cree Nation that, you know, we were often told that, you know, brothers and sisters would communicate through, you know, their parents, and there was a lot of reasons around that, and I can't possibly, I'm not even qualified to give that whole teaching, right? But you know, boundaries, we had boundaries, right? And individualism, and I said it before in this book and in Legacy, a healthy individual is what makes a healthy collective society, right? So you know, understanding that we are individuals and we need to find ourselves and we need to be responsible for how we are in relationship with others and that reciprocity. And then seeing the collective as the coming together of all of these incredibly balanced individuals, right? So yeah, I wanted to state that and to end with this idea that, you know, we have to do our own work. And whenever someone asks me, you know, how do I create the change that we need to see in our families and our communities and in our systems and institutions, you know, someone else might have a different answer, but I often say, do your own work. Because if we all do our own work, then that's the work being done, right? It's not always an outward thing. Even if we're working in a helper position. I know as a teacher, you know, when we walk into a classroom, we determine the energy in that room. We have I mean, even if you're taking an anti-oppression, you know, kind of framework to your work, as I do, we determine the energy in that room, and we have a lot of authority. People see us as being in authority. And so we learn as we become teachers, how to make sure that we go into that room and we're creating that good energy for students to be vulnerable, to be comfortable, that we can create that trust, and that there's good energy for learning, right? So again, yes, collective, of course, collective, but also it starts with us, right? So yeah, I think that's it in terms of reading from this book. I mean, I want to get to your questions because I don't want to run out of time, and you had a lot of good ones, but maybe at the end, if there's something that comes up during the questions, you know, I can share something else. I don't see any questions so far in the chat. Okay, so that's good, I guess. If I'm making sense and nobody's like, what are you talking about? That's a good thing. I want to say thank you for all of the questions that you submitted. I took a look at them when I received them from Manisha, you know, a couple days ago. And then last night I really sat with them and I felt them. And, you know, I jotted down a few ideas. And then of course this morning I added more things because I was like, oh, I should say that, you know. And I'll probably think of more things as I go through them. But I really, really want to thank you. I sat with these and you're all just amazing. So keep on being amazing. All right. So I thought last night, is there a way to go in order? But I'm just going to go in the order that they are here. So the first question I have here is to write on these topics. Are there certain things or rituals you do to keep your energy clear or calm? How do you release things as you go through them to share with us, the readers? Amazing question. Thank you. And I think what I did here last night and this morning is list things that help me connect. So for me, whenever I'm writing about something hard, and I did this for Legacy as well as for Killing the Wittigo, and sometimes, you know, having conversations with the young people I spoke to in the book, I felt what they were going through, and I was so amazed by who they are too, but you know, I wanted to reduce everything that they were going through, and I know that I can't. You know, we all have to go through our stuff, right? But so when I talk about, or I'm going to tell you about things that keeping energy clear or calm, it's for me what the trick is, or the important thing is to make sure I'm doing something that connects me, so that I'm not somewhere after a conversation or after I've been doing some writing and I'm just isolated and in my own head, right? I really need to be connecting with something so that I can sometimes just give those thoughts over to something else, you know, and to say, please take this from me. Or that I can reminisce and say, oh, that was a great conversation, right? And be in that happiness a little longer, that connection. Yeah, so you'll see as I go through that these are all like sort of connecting things. So first of all, I don't think I would be the person I am today if it weren't for acupuncture. Oh my, traditional Chinese medicine is so similar to the indigenous medicine that I've also accessed in my healing journey. And there's a lot on that in Legacy, so I won't go into it. But without acupuncture, oh, I would be just I often call my body like the carbon sack, because it's funny, right? Like I want to highlight that we are spirits and we are animated sometimes, in particular carbon sacks. I don't know, it doesn't sound that funny, but when I say it to myself, it seems funny. And I was really lucky in Toronto, and so that was when I was writing Legacy, to have access to a community acupuncture clinic, which means they had a sliding scale. That was, at that time in my life, the only way I could afford that kind of healthcare. Because, Canada does not have a healthcare system, right? We say we do, but we don't. We have an acute care system, so that if you're really, really sick, you can go to a doctor or go to a hospital. That's it. That's all we have, right? We don't really have. So unfortunately, we all have to pay out of pocket for mental health care, for acupuncture, chiropractic, physiotherapy. So finding a place that was a community practice with a sliding scale was key. And I'm so thankful to practitioners who have that as their business model. Now that in 2019, I packed up after 29 years in Toronto, and I knew I needed to be back out home, which is out west for me, both BC and Alberta, given that we spent a lot of time in each and I have history in each, in terms of my ancestors on different sides, And so I'm living in a very small community now on a Gulf island, and I can only afford to go once a month now because it's like the full $80. But if any of you want to try acupuncture, I would tell you that it's like an energetic reset. It is just so important to my healing. So if I'm stuck somewhere, or if there's a certain an organ that's bothering me, whether it's stomach issues or this or that, whatever it is, I go, acupuncture clears it right up. and it doesn't clear it up like taking a pill and make it go away. It's like it helps me understand, because there are emotions that go along with each organ system, and then an acupuncturist will tell you, how that relates to maybe, who you are in the world and how you are in the world. And then that becomes something that you can follow and learn from and grow from after that appointment, right? So acupuncture first on my list. I do a lot of meditation as well. And I always have this book with me, and I made sure to bring it with me so I could flash it on screen. I think I've done this once before too on a micro-learning session at MCC, but I love this book. It's called Meditation is Medicine. And it has all, and the person who wrote it is an MD, but he's also a yoga practitioner. And it's, you can Google it. It's been out for a few years, and it's a well-known, much loved book. Whenever I feel like, feeling like my physical body's telling me something, is something out of balance, I go there, I look up the different chakras, and it's not cultural appropriation as well. He is a yoga practitioner, and he, acknowledges all of his teachers. And it's a really, really good resource. So I do a lot of meditation. Manisha's clapping. Yes, right? Because some yoga in North America, and I can't speak to that as I'm not South Asian, but I have read articles about the problems when it becomes stripped of the energy work and becomes more like a workout or just like stretching or something. Yeah, this book is not that. This talks about the chakras and the energetic work, which is what we talk about in Indigenous medicine too. So I do a lot of walking. So when I was in Toronto, I always lived in the West End forever. That's a Toronto joke. There's a big east-west kind of thing going on. And I always made sure I lived close to the Humber River, because there are rivers coming from north down to Lake Ontario, right? And a lot of them have been put into culverts and hidden, but there are still the big ones are still. And so I would go walk by the Humber River. Of course, one of the reasons, besides just moving home, wanting to be home out west, was also that I wanted to be able to walk outside my house and be somewhere where there would be tall trees and a forest. And yeah, so I'm lucky to be able to have places to walk where it's quiet. And I don't have to see anybody if I don't want to. In terms of cultural approaches, I am not a huge smudge person. I used to be in the 90s. And now my practice has changed a little bit, because we hear a lot about certain practices, right? And I know when I worked at the Aboriginal Education Center for the TDSB and working in different schools, that a lot of people would go for like those ritualistic things and wouldn't really get to the actual cultural things underneath it, and it would become sort of performative. And I feel like in my own life, I don't do a lot of smudging anymore. I do sometimes, but I don't do it every day like I used to. Now what I try to do every day, and I don't get to do it every day, but I try to, is sing. So, you know, I only have like a handful of songs that I've learned from people in community, and they've been shared to me, and, you know, they're things that they have put out into the world to, you know, be used and shared. So I try to sing. And I know the Meditation as Medicine book also talks about when, you know, you do the chants when you meditate, that there's something that happens when we have those tones in our body. It affects us on the molecular level, right? So singing for me is a really good way to like get out of my head. Like if I've been writing all day and I'm like, ooh, up here somewhere, and I'm just this brain, and I'm like, I can't feel my feet. What's going on, right? Then I go out for a little walk and I'll sing a little song, and then it's like, whew, all of a sudden, okay, trees, earth, water, wind, right? Okay, we're back, right? So that singing can really change how you vibrate. See, I don't like that those new agers and the, you know, after the hippies came around, kind of appropriated all this stuff, because whenever you say something like that, like it changes how you vibrate, you just sound like a new ager. But just remember, they stole from us, not the other way around. I think to keep energy clear and calm, also a connection to the earth as well, right? So not everybody's into gardening. I used to do a lot of like perennial flower gardening when I was in Toronto. Now I'm trying to learn how to grow vegetables. It's a bit of a journey. And I've recently switched from trying to, you know, keep a garden free of weeds in the middle of the forest, which is pretty much, it's not a thing, to switching to a greenhouse. So going out into the greenhouse and just checking on the plants, just standing there and saying, oh, hello, spider. You crawled in here and you're setting up a web. Good, catch some aphids for me, right? And just standing, and it's not big, it's just a little tiny one, but I can stand in there and kind of, you know. So connecting with the natural world, whether it's something that I've put the seed in or whether it's something around me in the yard work is good as well. There's always yard work on a Gulf island. Friends are important. And I'm one of those people who, I don't have like 700 people on my personal Facebook page. I think I have like 8, right? It's like I have friends of 30 plus years, more than that. I'm still in touch with a person in Peace River that I met in grade 1, right? So, you know, 50 years. Oh, that sounds old. I'm not going to say that again. But and newer friends as well who've come into my life, being able to have a catch-up chat with a colleague slash friend, you know, because some of our colleagues become like friend colleagues, you know, having time, if we're in the same city, oh, you know, let's try to get an hour together or whatever. I'm old. I don't really chat on the phone, but we do, because that's an old person thing, isn't it? But, you know, Skype calls, connecting with folks that, you know, bring your heart joy, right? Yeah, so friends are really important. And I don't want to go on too long, but I want to give enough examples that maybe if that's something that you're interested in, that, you know, keeping energy clear, calm. Also, I like to make art. I don't think I'm very good at it, but I don't care. you know, making art is not about, you know, I have to be a professional visual artist and put it out there. I mean, I don't care. It's just about the creative process. And I recently took some of my hard-earned cash, and I'm looking over at it now, and invested in a, what do you call it, an easel, because I want to teach myself, learn, I don't know, how to make mixed media work on paper, I think. I'm not sure. So I'm going to try to watch some YouTube videos, and I have a lot of visual artist friends, but they're professionals, so I will not be asking them because that would just be weird. But yeah, make some art, you know, whatever that art is to you. If you like to sketch or draw a graphic, you know, do cartooning, or if you know, want to mix some beats, or if you want to, you know, I'm not much of a sport person, but I do also have a big recurve longbow on my wall here in my office with my arrows. So I am an archer as well. I use carbon feather arrows with the recurve longbow. So I go out in the back sometimes, and I put up my target bag and I shoot some arrows. And archery, like any sport, if you guys, you know, whatever your sport is, if you do sports, it's really good because you have to be precise, right? So, you know, on a layup, if you play basketball, or if you're setting the ball in front of the net in volleyball, or whatever it is you do, doubles badminton I played when I was in school, whatever it is, you've got to be aware of the steps, right? And how you're gonna doing something. And archery is a very meditative thing for me. And I couldn't do it for many years because bows are a couple $100. I didn't have that kind of money. But the two things I've invested in are to create some art and to buy a bow, a recurve longbow 2 years ago. So, and it's a very meditative thing where, you know, when I had a teacher here on the island, you know, I took, I think 4 lessons with him just to make sure that what I remember from being young in school and learning about archery, like, what's my form? Is it still good? You know? And so those things all help me remain clear and calm. Talking to my helpers as well. If you have, you know, wherever you are in your spiritual practice, keeping your heart and your spirit open to the ancestors in the spirit world is incredibly important, I think, for everyone, and especially for me. I can just say that, you know, whenever I think I'm responsible for fixing everything, which of course is impossible, or whenever I feel like I'm too busy, what do I have all these deadlines, I just reconnect, and I just, you know, I invite them to be in with me instead of me having to do all of it and feeling that pressure. I just like let it go, and I say, hey guys and girls, how are we doing? And I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but yeah, connecting with, you know, the spirit world. However that is that you do that. I know some people go to regular sweats. I know some people would play a hand drum. For me, it's very much about, you know, whoops, we have someone's mic is on. And sounds like a lovely young child, but and just making sure that I'm connecting. So that means connecting as well with, you know, the forces of the universe. So okay, so I hope there was something that you know made sense for other people. We're okay for time. So the next question is, I would love to learn ways to help encourage Indigenous young adults to show interest in their culture when they have not shown interest in the past. Another great question. You guys are stars. I thought a lot about this one in the days since I've been thinking about these questions. Excuse me. And because when I was teaching, I dealt with this. I taught a culture. There's a doggo. Hi, doggo. That's awesome. Hey, buddy. Might be a budette. Hello. When I was teaching young folks between, now I taught kindergartners, even though I wasn't certified to do so. Technically, I have to teach grades 4 to 10. That's what I'm certified for. But when you're in an elementary school, you always end up teaching the primaries too. The admin will just put you over there. So I taught kindergarten right up to grade 8 and 10 when I was at the Abed Center. We had some secondary students there. And you know, I dealt with students. I had one student dealt with students. I don't mean it in a bad way, but you know, I tried to create relationships with students who, yeah, were not into the plan. And their parent told them that they had to attend this event or my culture and traditions program or this or that, right? And, you know, some of them said, like, I don't want to be here. My mom told me I had to be here. I'm only here because my mom says I have to. And then they just like sit there, right? And I mean, for me, it's about relationship building, right? I think sometimes, and thinking very specifically to young people that I've worked with, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I wrote Killing the Wittigo, right, is because I thought, I've dealt with a lot of students who I feel like felt, well, I've had students actually say this to me too, who felt like they sort of didn't know enough to even start. Like they felt nervous, like I don't know any of that, and it was scary for them, and they didn't want to go there because, like, I don't know it, and I don't know how to do it, and they were very nervous, right? And then I did have a couple of students who said, like, I don't feel, and this breaks my heart, you know, where they were like, no, I'm not good enough for this. I'm not good enough. And I'm like, what? Of course you are. You are a sacred spirit. Your ancestors are here. They're waiting for you. I mean, they're here with you, even if you don't know they are. Trust me on that. They're guiding you and protecting you. But, you know, so I think sometimes what I try to do is I don't automatically go to the heavy ritual stuff, right? You know, I don't necessarily start with, like, you know, I mean, I'm not a powwow dancer anyway, but even if I did it as part of like a culture and traditions kind of curriculum thing, you know, I wouldn't necessarily start with like the different types of powwow dancing. I wouldn't necessarily start with smudging, or even a talking circle. I would try to build relationships first. And that's what I always did in my classrooms, and in my culture and traditions program. And it did work because it kind of, what's the word I want? Like it chipped away a little bit at that resistance, because I don't think that they don't have interest in it. I don't actually think that that's true. What they're saying is, I don't want to be here. I don't have any interest in that. I think that's what a lot of people, and even adults, right, say when they don't feel like, you know, and I've had adult clients say, oh, no, I was drinking this week. I can't come to the, you know, full moon ceremony. And I'm like, why? Why can't you? Who says? Right? Like, you know, and that feeling of not being good enough or not being clean enough for some people. Or I think that, oh, I'm not interested, can sometimes be like a defense mechanism, right? So start with the relationship building, and don't automatically, this is what I did anyway, don't automatically go to ritual. Start with the histories, experiences, and perspectives. So have a conversation about, well, listen, this is in the news these days, and how would that have been for our communities 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 10 years ago, whatever it is, and sort of get them talking about things, right? And don't necessarily go to like all of those like signposting, you know, cultural practices, as important as they are. I think sometimes people can be afraid to go there, right? And I always found, especially in my culture and traditions program that I taught at one school, over the years I was there, that the kids loosened up and did become interested, but it had to be on their own time. And some of them took 6 months, some of them took like the next school year before they were really ready to sort of, you know, incorporate something into their artwork or to incorporate something into their presentation or whatever we were doing, right? Or before they'd start asking me questions about, so miss, what do you know about blank? You know, it would take time. So don't necessarily think that it's going to be on your terms or on your schedule, right? Encouraging them, we do need to encourage them, but I think we can start by just making relationships with them, right? Making sure they know that we are there for them. And it's not about what we want them to do right now or what we think they need, even if we do know what they need, because, you know, as adults, as helpers, as whatever role we play, family members, we do have more life experience than they do, but people have to get to things in their own time, right? So start with histories, experiences, perspectives, then work in some of the cultural practices at that point. I also think it's really important for kids to see what the relevance is of what they're doing, even if it's culture-based, to their lives now, right? I should give you an example of that. I was teaching, was it grade 5 or grade 6? I think, it might have been a split 5-6. Anyway, it was either a grade 5 or a grade 6 class in Toronto District School Board. And there had been a lot of stuff going on with sexism. And I was shocked. Like, I mean, they're 10, they're 11, what is going on here? But, you know, I saw what was happening with, you know, some of the boys saying things that they picked up from pop culture and from each other and from home, and you know, and we all know that culture is like, you know, our children are socialized. There's various microcosms and macrocosms of society and all that teachery stuff. But you know, I saw this playing out in real time in my classroom where the girls wouldn't talk and the boys would put up their hands. And if a girl put up her hand, they'd like say something like, I mean, it was my classroom. They weren't jeering because that would never happen. They would not, I would not, you know, but they, you know, little whispers or a little something, or, well, you know, and I thought, how in the heck am I going to, and of course, this relates to culture and traditions because, you know, the patriarchy is an introduced thing through colonization. Now, I don't think that women have necessarily always had it easy in societies. I think there's a whole conversation that we could have about that around the place of women in pre-colonial Indigenous societies. But one thing we do know is that a lot of the women, like, you know, settler women who were either taken or, you know, married into or whatever, didn't want to go back to settler society after they experienced our life in our communities, right? So this is a new thing that has been introduced with colonization, this idea of, you know, the patriarchy controls everything. So I did a lesson the next, was it a couple days later? Was it the next week? I can't remember, around how the clan mothers basically elect and can depose chiefs in the Longhouse system in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And as I was delivering that lesson, I could see the girls, they'd stopped even writing notes and they were staring at me. Right? And the flip charts, because I had the whole, like, the Federalist system diagrammed, and, you know, that this representative from these clans would go up to the big meeting and then and all of this stuff, and talking about the role of the clan mothers. And those girls were just silent, and the boys were also like, kind of like this at first, but then they were also open. I could see their spirits open, and I could see them really thinking how amazing this system is, compared to, I'm sorry, what we see and the crap that women in politics have to go through today in like dominant society, political systems. And I just thought, oh yeah, this is why we teach, right? So sometimes what we talk about as culture, we need to make sure also that we're talking about our frameworks. So whether it's governance, whether it's, our societies, like the societies in our nations, whether it was a medicine society, a warrior society, or whatever, and whatever our like if a nation has a clan system, because not all do, or what our systems and our frameworks of being within our nations. We need to try to relearn or learn those if they've been, sidelined by colonization or residential school as much as possible. Sometimes we need to recreate as well. That process of reclamation isn't always easy. But that was a way, I mean, those girls talked about that for months. And they had more questions, and then a couple of them wanted to do projects on it. And it wasn't about me that, oh, I'm such a great teacher. No. It was about them, and about the fact that they saw the importance of our systems and how important women were. And they were like, screw that, right? So doing that kind of stuff brings them into this space where they just are like completely amazed by how we are and were, right? So get them like that, right? And I mean get them, but I do mean get them involved by making it relevant to their lives. And then I facilitated a lunchtime girls group at that same school, and so we talked about that a lot in the girls group too after that lesson was delivered, where the girls had so many questions. So by making it relevant to their lives, they see culture as values and as ways of being in the world and ways of dealing with problems and conflicts in the world, right? Ways of building up a sense of identity, a sense of self. And it's not just about, I have to learn these things and do these things. I mean, yes, our rituals are important, and we eventually did get there. But there's different ways to sort of get them interested, right? Because, when you're dealing with kids, sometimes it helps to make things about them, right? It's not necessarily about this important thing that you should be interested in, even though that's true. It's about how does this important thing actually help you or, make a difference in your life today, right? So that's a great question, because that's sort of why I wrote Killing the Wittigo, is some of the experiences that I had teaching, and just realizing that, even though I don't have it's not a book of lesson plans, obviously, it's about intergenerational trauma and how we talk about that and what we have to think about and what it means to do healing work. But those experiences I had teaching very much became a part of the reason why I wanted to write Wittigo. Yeah. Wow. I give long answers. Okay. I'm fine with that. Hopefully I can make it interesting enough that as we go along. The next question, also a great question. Young people can be great teachers. What was the most surprising, useful, or interesting thing you learned from this book's young collaborators? Oh, I could go on even longer than I have about that, but I came up with the two biggest things when I was thinking and sitting with these questions last night. The most surprising thing is how comfortable young people are talking about mental health. I have to admit, that is way different from my generation. And it's definitely different than some of the young people that I've worked with in the classroom. I think Canadian society has changed because I started teaching 15 years ago, right, at the age of 40. Now in 15 years, I think Canadian society has also changed that much more. In terms of the Indigenous context, I think definitely the TRC report has had a huge, you know, effect on us, and survivor testimonies. And, you know, part of the research I did for Legacy was the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, which was closed down by the Harper government. Thank you. But their reports and research papers still exist, you know, online. And so, you know, I think I am just wowed by the work that, you know, the younger generations are doing around talking about these issues, because we didn't talk about these things even 20, 25 years ago, not the way they are talked about now. And that kind of reflects Canadian society as well. Because I mean, I think pre-colonial times we would have talked about, you know, because mind, body, spirit, and emotion, that would have been part of our daily lives. But since colonization, when you look at, you know, how our societies now mirror the dominant society in some ways, you know, I remember when that Bell Let's Talk, I think it's called, campaign started. When was that? Oh, was that 15, 10? No, I don't even know when it started, but it was like, you know, it's been a few years now for sure. And that Olympian was talking about her struggle with depression and anxiety. Like, that was considered very like, whoa, she's like coming forward, she's like talking about it, right? That was a big thing in Canada, right? And so I think society has changed. That definitely reflects on Indigenous societies, because yeah, you know, we live side by side and have been dominated by colonial society for so long. But I was very pleasantly surprised at how open the young folks I spoke to for this book were talking about mental health and about their journeys, and how open they were. And I would like to think that hopefully that speaks to the connection that we had, that we were able to create a safe space. But it is mostly, I think, just about them and who they are and how hard they're working. Doesn't mean that every day is perfect, so they told me, but they're doing a lot of work, right? Yeah, so that was one of the most surprising. And then one of the most interesting things I learned from the young people that I spoke with was how compassionate they are toward their families. I just found that incredibly interesting, given that I've already said that I was pretty angry in the 90s. I was really interested and fascinated by, you know, them all being so young and yet completely understanding. So I guess it is, you know, again, the different conversations that we're having nowadays, right, about why certain things are happening in our communities, and understanding the context and the connection to colonization and continuing colonialism. And you know, working with them, because all three of them, you know, I made sure in this book, and I told them straight up, you know, I really want to talk to some young people for this book. And you know, and I reached out to my colleagues and friends, and so people were recommended to me, and then I got in touch with them and said, do you want to be involved? And so for the folks that I did speak to, I made sure that they saw everything before it was published, and that there was time for them to look at their words, to make changes, so that they had the control at all times. It was not going to be about, I'm taking this from you, because, you know, Indigenous peoples, we've had that happen to us pretty much all the time, right? And I wasn't going to repeat that here. So the control rested with them. There were a lot of changes. That was great. And you know what, actually, here's a new thing just popped into my head. Another interesting thing. which actually, your question, surprising, useful, interesting, this is also a useful thing, is that how much they grew in like just mere months and even into a year when we were doing the final edits on this book, with the publishers, like the editors at the publisher, how much they had grown in that time, that, I had a couple of them email me or text me and say, oh, I can't believe I said that. I was so young then. And I'm like, oh dear, you're still young. I love you, right? But them saying, no, I understand more about this now. Can I change it to this? And I was like, yes, of course you can, because I wanted to capture the thing that they felt, really represented them at this point in time in this thing that we have to put inside a book cover that, is going to be sort of, kind of kept in time. That's not really the right word, but, frozen in time, I guess, right? So, and that was useful for me as a writer, because I often feel like during the editing process, like, oh, well, I don't need to bother those editors, do I? By making a change right now. Yeah, you do. So it was very interesting to me to have those young people show me that no, you have control over your voice at all times, and you should take that control and honor that. And that was very useful for me. So yeah, I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from all three of these people. And I'm so grateful that they shared some time with me. And I mean, they've all said that it was a good process, so I'm thankful to them for saying that. I tried to make it that way, but it was a lot for them to open up and to share things, and knowing that it's going to be in a book and read by other people, and their compassion for their families, their parents, their aunties, their uncles, their cousins, everybody, for their communities. It was a beautiful thing to see. Yeah. So I learned from that as well, is that, I mean, it's not like I didn't know it before, but it's like a good reminder as a helper person, whether I'm writing or teaching or whatever, is that compassion. That's where we connect, and where we can share stories and make change, right? So yeah, they were awesome teachers for me. The next question was an interesting one as well. How can we foster more meaningful conversations with older generations about inclusion, diversity, sexual orientation, and identity? And I kind of took the question to mean that inclusion and diversity was sort of like equity and inclusion, and then sexual orientation was like a separate thing in terms of inclusion and diversity. So I sort of concentrated on, well, I have a couple comments around the whole, sexual orientation thing, being a two-spirit myself. And I laughed about older generations, because I was like, uh-oh, because technically as a Gen Xer, I'm kind of an older generation, right? But then the boomers are still around. But then, I mean, to a Gen Z, maybe the millennials are the older generation. So just everybody, right? When I was thinking about this, I have to be clear that there's still a lot of homophobia. And maybe this is why you're asking, right? There's still a lot of homophobia in a lot of Indigenous communities. I have to state that outright. And it's not fun all the time. There were me and another teacher at one school I was at, and we were both Indigenous. Neither of us were out at all. Didn't feel safe at all. And there was a time when we went to, like in schools, how they go to like different schools, and then there's projects, and you're not always just in your classroom, like you do stuff with other things and at other schools. And so there was a thing at another place, and the facilitator was from a language program at a university in Toronto. And I read that person definitely as a two-spirit, what I would read as a gay man. And I was happy for that. I was like, the kids are gonna work with this person, and they were really good at their job. Like, as a teacher, I'm pretty picky, right? Like, I'm like, and most teachers are, we're like, are they good? Oh yeah, okay, good, they're good, right? And this person was really good at their job. And then the other person, who was my colleague, and neither of us were out at that school, came to me, I don't know, a couple days, week after that event, which the event was great. And this person was so good at their job. The kids were learning. It was such a great event. And then he came to me, which, no surprise there, because even though we weren't out, we knew who each other were, right? And he said to me, so-and-so at the event. I said, yeah, wasn't he great? Oh, well, there's been a complaint made. And I'm like, a complaint? Heavens, they were so good at their job. The kids really enjoy. What do you mean a complaint? What happened? And oh, well, and they clearly were not comfortable talking about it. And they said, I guess he said something. So I'm like, said what? And then that same thing was said about me. If you've read Legacy, you know that there was a school that I was pushed out of by only 2 or maybe 3 bully parents, and the rest of the parents were like, no, we love this program. I'm learning from my kids. What's happening here? But admin did not know how to deal with those 2 or 3 bullies who really wanted to. And so the whole thing about they said something being some sort of accusation, and I very much, and because this person came to me and we were standing in my room and we weren't going to talk about it, but we both knew, and I went, oh, really, eh? He said something. No. And I felt right away, and I just knew that something had happened, because this person was very, would be understood to be gay by everyone. Kids had no problem with it, but apparently somebody else, I don't know who, did. So I really do thank you for this question. And I see a comment coming in, so I will get there. Thank you. The continuing effects of colonization and colonialism and residential schools and Christianization. I was baptized Catholic. I often say I'm a recovering pagan, so I think it really is still affecting our communities. So what I would say to answer your questions, how can we foster more meaningful conversations? I sat a long time with this question last night, and I was like, how do we do that? And I came to the idea that, and this is an idea some of you may have already heard, that change begins at the emotional level, right? With individuals. So for me, in any of my helping work in an agency setting or in my education work, even in my writing, I always am writing with this idea of change is good, right? So plan community projects. I am a big fan of the community project, right? Whether it's a mural under a bridge in like a downtown, whether it's a wall in a school classroom with just one classroom, whether you have an outside facilitator and a budget for an honorarium, whether you don't, and it's just a classroom teacher, or an artist in the school, whether you let a student take the lead, there's a lot of fantastic student artists, whether it's, you could do like a book club, right? And invite different knowledge keepers, elders, older people in the community to help lead, and then choose books that are about these issues. Whether inclusion, diversity, or sexual orientation could be, it doesn't have to be a whole book. You can take sections, and of course, Most writers, we are registered for, you know, the canned copy stuff so that we get paid for photocopies in an educational setting. So it is perfectly fine to take a few photocopies because, you know, we get paid through that system, right? And, you know, just take a section from a memoir. It doesn't have to be the whole book, right? So, you know, you could start a discussion circle, a book club. And you could do something big, you know, plan like a community fair or, you know, the yearly powwow at some of my schools. We would have a committee, of course, both educators and administrators and parents, and then build the diversity into that project, either through, as I said, you know, a certain book, a certain reading, a certain piece of art, or bring in, you know, a two-spirit person who happens to be an artist, or, you know, however you can, you know, come up with it, plan it. Make sure if you are planning like a big thing, like a powwow or a fair, that you're inviting community organizations, and then make sure you have that table for the local, you know, if you're in a bigger city, there could be like a pride society or something like that. If you're in a smaller community, it might be, you know, the two people who, you know, plan the annual, you know, Pride Day flag raising or sunrise ceremony or something, right? So make sure that you're coming together, you know, and spending time together. Invite people to work side by side. I think that that is the only way that we can really create some forms of change, because people have ideas about things because they've been told, right? That's what we've been told by all these systems and the way they changed our societies. And if you get to know someone as a human being on an emotional level, then everything changes, right? And I would say, and this is a big thing, also make sure that your leadership, in whatever context that is, whether it's school administration, whether it's like a chief and council situation, whether it's your managers at an Indigenous-led agency, whatever it is, make sure that leadership is on board and that they are demonstrating, you know, that there's a media release that goes out about this project, that there's, you know, an update at every meeting or whatever, where people are invited to speak about the aims of the project, you know what I mean? Like really make sure that leadership are on board so that this, and that relates to, I'm going to bring it back to what my colleagues and I experienced in that example at the beginning. You know, he said something and then he was taken off the project and the kids weren't allowed to work with him anymore. Come on, he didn't say anything, he was gay. So if the leadership are on board, then if somebody comes to them with a complaint, they know how to deal with that. And they can be well aware that this is not something to be worried about, that in fact, we should just invite that person who makes the complaint to come and join the project, right? So make sure that leadership are on board. And I hope that answers it. There's a lot we could talk about there. Yeah. So I want to get to this comment. And thank you, Celeste, for sharing. My granddaughter is Indigenous, transgender. One daycare worker said I was abusing my child. Oh no, because I let her dress as a girl. And then in brackets, she's put biologically male. I got scared being an Indigenous single parent, of course, of Child and Family Services. My Gabby was 3 and I had to hold her down to dress her as a boy. That is terrible, I know. She was happy to dress as a girl. Don't we want our children to be happy? She said she was a girl since she could speak. She spent most of her time at daycare in the hall. You know, when I used to see that at some of my schools, kids in the hall, no. That, that makes me angry. No, that is not good pedagogy. Teachers everywhere, no. Or if you're an ECE worker, whatever, that is not being a good helper. no, just no. And then, oh yeah, and then Celeste has clarified, grandbaby, not Gabby. Needless to say, she wasn't there long. Okay, good for you, moving her out of the situation. The world expects, I'm sorry, I'm getting a box over the chat here. Let me move my, okay. The world expects my grandbaby to educate people. Oh yeah, ain't that the way? Same with all Indigenous people, whatever issue it is, right? I just dealt with this recently, where something happened to me that was actually very, like, I wouldn't say re-traumatizing, but it was very rude in a way. It was a July 1st thing. I'm sure you can all understand the context, Canada Day. Yeah, I won't go any farther because it ain't about me. But, and then I was expected to educate people after that. No, oh, you go away and learn about it. Learn how to Google. Yeah, so Celeste said the world expects her to educate people. It feels fighting to be always. Yeah, yeah, fighting to be. Isn't that the thing? We're always fighting to be. I really like that. And I see you have some hearts here from some folks, so people are hearing you. And then Celeste says, lol, I don't know why I keep changing grandparent to Gabby. But, you know, we were talking about older generations, but, you know, I don't necessarily think that we're always talking about older people. Some older people are cool as hell, right? In terms of these issues. And, you know, I'm going to guess that, you know, daycare, they were probably younger folks like millennials or my generation, maybe working there. So, you know, yeah, and Celeste just said learned behaviors with older ladies in that specific example. Yeah, exactly. And thank you for that, Celeste. It is definitely about learned behaviors. And again, the ways that colonization have affected our communities and the ways we now repeat these things. And that's why I've written 2 books on the cycle of intergenerational trauma, because now we are perpetuating these to a certain extent, even though we resist, even though we're in this process of cultural reclamation, even though we are awesome for surviving all of this, even though we are strong and vulnerable when necessary, we are also in this cycle where we are perpetuating it. And that's what trauma is, because someone who experiences trauma, unresolved issues, then it passes through the generations simply because, you know, that's going to affect if you're experiencing trauma, that's going to affect your parenting. It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect the way you are in the world. I know that. I experienced it myself. I saw it with my mother and my other family members. So yeah, Celeste has added here, yeah, religion, Christianity, perception of dialogue, egos, control, need to be right. Yes, all of that. And that's why I think I've written these 2 nonfiction books. I'm working on 2 kids books right now that are about issues not trauma related, which is kind of nice. And I'm also working on a novel, some fiction. But I wrote these 2 nonfiction books because of exactly those things. So thank you, Celeste, for your comments. The need for dialogue, the need to know that, yes, we are a part of a collective, which is why it can be about us and what we think, you know, that's Wittigo energy, right? As opposed to use the Cree word, I don't know what it would be in other people's cultures, the idea of kinship relations, we say wakotwan, right? So this idea of treating everyone like a relation, right? To, you know, make sure that we're actually conversing and that it's not just about, well, I think, as we see on so much social media today, right? Control is also a big thing. Thank you for putting that there, Celeste. The need to be right. when we experience trauma, I write in both Legacy and in Killing the Wittigo around the idea of complex trauma. It's a whole thing, and I talk about it in the books, so I won't get into it here because I am mindful of time too. We got another couple of questions. But you know, when Indigenous peoples were colonized, are still experiencing colonization, colonialism, then it becomes this battle for control, right? And when you've been denied voice, denied agency, and been under someone else's control, and then sometimes our response to experiencing that trauma is to try to get control because we've been denied that. And so, and sometimes it is, as Celeste has pointed out, that like learned behavior. And so learning the bad form of control, the negative form of control, and sort of, you know, putting that on other generations or other peoples around us. And sometimes it's about, you know, knowing that what happened to us was wrong in some cases and trying to get control over our lives, but then that can lead to some things like isolating ourselves or, you know, not really being able to be vulnerable, that sort of thing. So I really appreciate you being so honest, Celeste. And it breaks my heart. And I hope that, and I don't want to put you on the spot, don't feel like you have to answer, but I'm just saying, I hope that, you know, I'm glad you resisted, you know, that idea, you know, that the world doesn't need your grandbaby to educate everybody, and just let's remove them from this unsafe situation. And I'm glad you put that boundary. I also wonder, you know, in the future, how those folks at that agency will learn from this. And I hope that there is some learning on their end as well. Yeah. So I don't know if I answered that question, but I'm all about the community projects. I don't know. Now I'm starting to think, how would that look at a daycare center? But I'm sure you can all figure it out. Celeste just said here, oh, this is great. Yeah, creating safety. Exactly. We need to create safety for everyone, for all of us, whether it's women complaining of, you know, sexual harassment in some of our organizations, whether it's kids in daycare, whether it's students in school in a dominant society system, whatever it is. One of the ways of doing this work of healing is creating safety. Thank you, Celeste. And there's another comment here. Oh, we've got a question, how to create safety. I can get to that. But we have another comment here around, are you able to talk more about your children's books and novel? I could do that. Let me go back to that. I'll answer Manisha's questions about how to create safety, how to create trust. Well, if I had a formula, I would bottle it and give it to you all, because wouldn't that be fun and great and easy? Unfortunately, it's not, and I know you know this, but it's not that easy. For me, in my experience as a teacher and as an agency worker, definitely creating safety is about having that, what I call unconditional positive regard, right? So no judgment ever. I did something, it was outside because it was like second year of COVID. It was like 2021. We were all outside, don't worry. I did like a 2 days a week for 2 weeks kind of series of sessions with a local friendship center here on Vancouver Island. And someone told a story one day around how she had, you know, tied her little kitten up on the porch, and I just went, oh my God, because I knew what was coming. Like, cats will always want to explore. You can't tie a cat by the neck. It's not going to end well. And of course it didn't end well. And when that person said that, and her grief at coming home and seeing, you know, and I don't want to traumatize anyone, but and her cat was no longer alive. And you know, I have been we grew up with budgies and gerbils and dogs and cats and all sorts of things. as a person who really values, I don't have an animal companion right now, but as a person who's always had animals and values the natural world in that way, as most people do, I mean, it would have been easy for me to just go, oh my God, how could you do that? How can you not know? You know, no, right? I think that unconditional positive regard is that I knew what was coming, but I kept that neutral mind, right? Because it's not about judging a person. It's about this happened and she's actually broken up about it. She definitely learned from it. Unfortunately, now that animal companion has to come back around the medicine circle and be born into a new life. It was pretty traumatizing for her, and you know, the person from the friendship center like looked at me all worried, like, oh, like, you know, because she's disclosing something was a little bit horrific, and so the facilitator, like the staff person, was like, oh no, right? But I just, it was like keeping my heart open and just like listening to this person, and her need to tell this story for whatever reason she had. And so I don't know if that's the best example. It's the one that came to me. How to create safety is that unconditional positive regard, is just saying, I'm here and I'm listening, and nothing you can tell me is going to shock me or make me not like you or make me, you know, ding, 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 anything like that. It's just, we're here and my heart and my spirit is open. And I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but it's like that listening where it's not about you having to speak right away. And well, you know, I would have done it. Nah, just be quiet, just listen, right? So I think creating safety is really also about listening, unconditional positive regard, and also listening. People don't need to be told things. I think most people know things, and it's our jobs together, whether we're just community members or colleagues or friends, or whether we're in a helping position, to just, what's the word? Like I want to say massage, but that could be taken the wrong way. Like to grow that connection, right? And listening, and yeah, no judgment. How to create trust? I think that comes from safety. Although, I don't know, some people might argue that maybe trust should come first and then safety would follow. But for me, I say safety starts it and then the trust follows. Because once people are in a safe space, you know, like the students in my classrooms, then they know that I can be trusted, that they can come and they can tell me anything. But you have to create that safety, which is no judgment. You can say anything here. And I'm here for you. So also part of safety is, if you say you're there for them, be there for them. Even if you're leaving the organization and it's the end of a very long work day, for example, or whether, you know, you've got your own things that day or whatever. If someone says, you know, hey, can I talk to you? Try to find that time, because there could be that. I mean, yes, boundaries are important too. We can't always be on, but you know, that trust also comes from, you said you'd be here for me and you are here for me. And that goes for friendships as well, relationships, right? And so Celeste has added show and voice support. Yes, we have to stand to support someone when we see something that is not right. Yes, it is okay to be wrong if the situation is misconstrued on my end. Exactly. We can have dialogue. Yeah. And Celeste says, I apologize when I am, usually joke about my busybodiness, but showing others that we care, even when they're a stranger, maybe the only care they have. Yes, and can hold on to. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I'm often saying, and it's never in a bad way, I mean it in a good way, you know, that, oh, I'm a nerd, or, oh, well, that was my teacher self. And yeah, so I often try to make a joke out of it too around, I guess it's a form of busybodiness if you're a teacher or a, you know, a helper nerd, but yeah, showing and voicing support, absolutely. More comment here, who am I to judge? I feel there's so much in unspoken words, smiles, nods, inclusion. Yes, thank you for that. Body language, very important. There's a certain way that, and I've seen it with like new teachers walking into a classroom, or, you know, when cops are like barking orders and, you know, they're all tensed up and like calm down. Like there's a certain kind of energy, and that relates to like how our bodies are in space, how our spirits are. That kind of energy is so important. That neutral sort of mind, or spirit, if you want. Yeah. So I'm mindful of time, and I will get back to that question about the new books, maybe at the very end. But there's two more questions, three maybe. Are you aware, have you seen any meaningful integration of Indigenous wellness and healing approaches used in public health care? I wish. Now, maybe I'm just uninformed. If you know something more, please add it to the chat. And oh, and I do see something coming in about safety. So let's go there. Yeah, the ability to receive other people's vulnerable truths without imposing your own energy judgment is such a powerful gift. Yeah, it is. And thanks for posting that in the chat, because I think sometimes we don't always, as a society, whether it's dominant society or Indigenous societies, you know, a lot of people want to do a job. And sometimes I look at them and I think, is your gift really for this work, right? And working with students, that was part of my job, is helping them decide what their goals were, what they could contribute to civic society, to community, to the world, right? And so I think there is a bit of giftiness happening, and oh, that one got 3 hearts too. So yeah, everybody's kind of doing the applause. I think we really need to be careful that who we have in positions of like governance leadership, who we have in terms of, you know, helper positions and like those daycare workers, for example, in the other comments, that they have the gift for the work. And I'd like to think that we knew that before. And I think there's been changes now with, you know, everybody has to have a job. It's about being a job. But it's more than a job. It has to be a gift. So thanks for that comment. Yeah, back to the meaningful integration of Indigenous wellness and healing approaches. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong on this, okay? But from what I've researched and heard and experienced even, and we just went through or going through a pandemic, not really. The CBC runs a story every now and again about like a new smudging room opening at a hospital. Like that makes the news. Woo. And I mean, that's good, I guess. But I still feel like it's that performative kind of thing sometimes. Not that it would be for users. I think it might be important for some patients or for some family members of patients. But I would like to see Western medicine and the healthcare system use plant medicine, right? And I went on and on about that in Legacy. So, and a little bit about Killing the Wittigo. I would like to see them have medicine people working inside health centers and hospitals, right? I think the mind-body connection is still really difficult for Western medicine. The quantum world is just not their world. They live in a very enlightenment, this equals that world. Under a microscope, this does this, so therefore that's the thing. Whoa, right? Never mind about all of this, right? I think spirituality in Western medicine is even more difficult than the mind-body connection has been for them to sort of integrate. I spoke a little bit about mental health too, around it's not really present, like, and more so like the mind-body connection. I'm speaking in terms of like intergenerational trauma, unresolved emotions, but just overall mental health. I don't necessarily think that that's really a part of, like, you know, when you go to a hospital or a doctor and complain about symptoms. I mean, some people may ask about it, but then we're most often prescribed pills or something, right? Or labels. So I don't know. I think Indigenous peoples, honestly, I think we need to set up our own health centers. That's what I think. And yeah, with what money, I know. But that is where I accessed, you know, a healing circle in the early 90s when I was in my 20s, where I accessed, you know, guys, you know, there was, you know, medicine people coming down from different communities up north, Manitoulin Island. Some of them were medicine people. Some of them were, you know, what some people call a shaman. Some of them were plant, like herbalists, you know, and that was at Anishinaabe Health Toronto. So I think it's really maybe something that we need to investigate, because I really do not see Western medicine or systems and institutions integrating it very well. I don't, but please prove me wrong. And then we have a comment here. I heard they pulled women's gender studies from policing and engineering as a mandatory credit course here in Saskatchewan. I said, wait, what? Trauma-informed process includes trauma information. Yeah, how can you be a cop and not know about like issues of, you know, women's studies or gender studies? I know. There's like a very sort of like blinkers on that we're going to study this thing, and it's not always as holistic as it needs to be. I agree. Same with Western medicine. And some people are saying I need to step out soon or now. Thank you so much for coming. If you're still here, yes, I understand. And thank you for sharing the space that you could with us. Creating a public conclusion is more it is for funders and patrons to buy in. I feel I'm kind of skeptical when it comes to corporate values. I need to research them. Yeah, good point. You know, there's a lot about the Western medical system that's about money, right? And I wrote about that in Legacy around kidney dialysis, that, you know, the federal government are so happy to spend money building dialysis centers, but not funding, you know, trauma counseling, which could help prevent that sort of disease, right? So, all right. So in our last 10 minutes together, I told you it was going to go fast. Next question is, how do you shape clarity with the heavy topics you write about? I know, I'm sorry, but I'll talk about the new books to end, and what helped you achieve the strategy to do so. I sat with that question a lot too, like, geez, is anything I do clear? there are parts of Legacy that I think, is that clear at all? Same with Wittigo. I'm like, I don't think some of my things are clear at all. I try though. And so what I came up with in the end is, I think if there's any clarity on any of these issues, and speaking specifically about 2 books on intergenerational trauma, is I got old. I couldn't have written either of these books in my 20s. I just couldn't have. And maybe that's a me thing. Maybe someone else could have, but I'm sort of thinking that it was the reason why I had to be the person writing these books, because, you know, is because I've had 30 years of going through it, both myself and seeing in community what we've been going through and what we've been doing to heal. And it took a long view. So how did I shape any clarity? I just got older. and so I took those 30 years now plus of experience, and tried to put that down here. And I think for a strategy, and I sat with this for a long time, this was a fascinating question to me. The strategy for me was, I think, seeing it as outside myself. So being at a certain point in my own healing where I wasn't in it and like, because I tried to write about this in fiction form in a novel that has remained unpublished, thankfully, and will always be unpublished, in the 90s. And I wasn't there. I couldn't do it, right? So seeing it outside myself, I had to be at a certain point in my healing journey to be able to say, okay, I've done enough work that all these issues, it's not just about me and what I'm going through anymore, right? It's here and I can look at it. And it still relates and I'm still going through stuff and, you know, changing, but yeah. There was a time with Legacy that, you know, there was a chapter 4. I remember it well, that my editor at the press said, this is a little bit emotionally fraught. I was like, what? Why? Like, I did not see it at all. I gave it to a colleague of mine who was my manager at an agency that I worked at, and she read it. She's a sociologist and counselor. And she read it and she got back to me the same day with her comments, and she said, Suzanne, this whole chapter is about see me, see what I went through, see how I've been wronged. And you can't put that on the reader because they can't help you. This is past. You have to tell the story in a different way. Oh, I did not see it, right? So, and that was, you know, almost 10 years ago was when I was working on Legacy. So yeah, seeing it outside yourself, I think, is the strategy. Is there any comments on that? Oh yeah, and someone else commenting that, yeah, Western medicine is so much about symptoms and not on the main cause. Oh yeah, both of these books talk about that a lot. It's a problem. Lynette has said, with age comes wisdom. We need time to process and see. Also with the universe, yes, it comes when it is needed. Thank you, Lynette. I have a character in the novel named Lynette, but I promise it's not you. Okay, it's very, yeah, that's funny. And yeah, when I think of the book I tried to write in the 90s, and I hope, you know, do I want to say that? Maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to embarrass that other writer. I'll just say that there's another book that has been published that basically is the book I was trying to write in the 90s. And it's a really good book. But I don't want to tell you which one because I don't want to at all compare I don't think that would be a good thing to do. But there's since been a book, and when that book came out, I went, oh, this is such a great book. It is so much better than the book I wrote. And so per your comment, yes, I think I got the book that I was meant to have with Legacy, and then with Killing the Wittigo, these, and then with the new books that are soon coming out, I think you get, you know, the books, and if you're a visual artist or a singer, you get the songs, you get the paintings, whatever it is that you're supposed to get. Art is this material, you know, mysterious kind of process, but I think the universe and our spirit helpers put us where we need to be when we need to be there. And that means the work we put out into the world, right? And some people are leaving. I know we've only got a few minutes. So the last question here is, because I had some compliments. Those weren't really questions. You guys are way too complimentary. The very last question, and I don't want to end in a heavy space. I will talk about the new work. But it did ask me about what my learning and schooling has been like. So just let me say very quickly, because I don't want to bring us down or anything. School was a safe place for me between grades 1 and 9. I was a good student. I liked school. It wasn't home. I didn't have to deal with the stuff that was going on at home. Now, you know, there was racism. There were some teachers who didn't expect a lot from me. Like I said, I was racialized even when I didn't know my family's story, right? So I learned to advocate for myself in high school because you're doing more choosing of your courses. And I knew that I was not a math and science person. And, you know, a guidance counselor kept trying to push me even to taking like what, you know, he called the shop math, like, you know, the non-academic math. And I just said, no, I don't want any of that. I want to take histories and honors English. I'm like, eh. So I learned to advocate for myself. Undergraduate school was good for me for the first couple of years. And then by about year 3 and 4, I did a 4-year honors program. It was really, really difficult. There was a definite lack of diversity with the teaching staff. I mean, this was the late 1980s, between 86 and 90. There were no like Indigenous student associations back in 1986. No, there were not, unfortunately. I did not have any family support. I was at one point working 4, count them, 4 jobs, 2 banquet waitressing at 2 different hotels, you know, busing at a gay bar, and then another restaurant. It was ridiculous. My postgraduate degree in education, there were long commutes. Again, no support, no money. I had to work, even though I was teaching all day, because practicum teachers are not paid, even though we teach your children all day. I had to go work at night. So I did all my reading on the bus and the subway. And look, we all have hard luck stories, right? And we get through it. I got through it. It taught me a lot about myself and about other people, though. I would still definitely, if anybody is interested in education and post-secondary education, especially, it's not going to be easy if you're an Indigenous person. But I wouldn't necessarily trade those experiences, though, because it taught me how tough I was. It taught me a lot about the world and about people in it. And it taught me to advocate for myself. And yeah. And I hope that was what your question meant, like, how has it been like, and not what I took or anything. I was a humanities nerd. So to end, we have exactly like 2 minutes or something. Someone had a comment around, you know, the new book. So that is a great place to end. Thank you for asking about that. Yeah, I'm working on now, both of them are kind of public knowledge. We signed the contracts. Yes, got to check that, you know, got to be appropriate. I'm working on a book for Scholastic Canada right now, which is for the middle grades. And it's going to be book 2 in a graphic novel series about different social issues. So my book, I'm writing on clean water water from the Indigenous context. And I don't exactly know what all the other books are about, but I'm really looking forward to that. It should be out sometime next year. I've got the first draft in, and I've gotten the editor's comments, and now I'm doing draft 2. And then we'll be going into illustration and design, you know, this fall, in the winter sometime, whenever. So it should be out, I'm not sure when, in 2024. And then I'm working on an Indigenous Atlas of Canada. We don't have a title for that yet, for Kids Can Press. That's also for the middle grades. And if you know the Canadian Geographic series, is it 3 or 4 books? I'm looking over at the pile. They had a bunch of map books. One was Inuit, the other was Métis, one was First Nations, and then there was like an introductory volume. It's like the kids version of that. So there's going to be a lot of maps and illustrations, but written for the middle grades. So yeah, it's been really nice to sort of get back to talking to kids again, and having just finished Killing the Wittigo for a YA audience, a little bit older. Now I'm back in the middle grades. Kids are a little bit younger. And yeah, I'm about to, when I'm kind of done the first draft of the Kids Can book, I'm gonna start writing full time, I hope, on a novel. All I can tell you is that it is set in Northern Alberta, but one character moves to Toronto, and I want to talk about the things that we've been dealing with. You know, it goes from the 1980s to the 2020s, so it's kind of an annex novel, I think, in a way. It's all about how we grew up, the changes that we made after Kanesatake, and then now today, where are we? And I kind of want to, even though it's fiction, it's very heavily character based. I really want to build a world and build characters that people can relate to. and that are complex. You know, a character can't be just all good or all bad, you know, these sorts of things. I want to make them very complex people, because those are the people that I know. Those are the people that we all know, right? People aren't all good or all bad, but to talk about our responses to change, to talk about abandonment and estrangement and loss, and how we build our communities, how we build our societies, and the work we do to do that. Yeah, so it's in the very big themes place right now. I might have to, you know, and plot-wise, I'm not going to share just because I don't want to wreck it, and it could change anyway, but yeah. Okay. Oh, we have a last couple of, someone's like, oh, how exciting. Yeah, I'm excited to start all of this new writing as well, or to continue in the case of the Scholastic book. Jessica says, I think Elizabeth Gilbert had something to say. The same thing of a book she wrote was supposed to write, but someone else wrote it. Exactly. I think we get the book we're meant to have. And so I'm happy the way things worked out. I've gone 3 minutes over, but I think we've had a good conversation today. I really want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy days to spend this time and to be active in the chat. And y'all are just awesome. And now I'm getting some thanks. Thank you to everyone back. I won't respond to each one, but I'm reading them all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll post on Facebook, and I'll have it on my website when the video goes up. So thank you, everyone. And should I give it back over to Manisha, or should I just say goodbye? I'm not sure. There she is.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just fascinating. I think it was just fascinating.
Well, the world